Schedule health is one of the most misunderstood parts of construction scheduling. Most of us know a passing score on a DCMA 14 doesn't really mean your project is healthy. Few really understand why. A project can pass every single check, but still fail. Because, for example, maybe the work doesn't actually match what's happening in the schedule. And that gap could cost millions. If you're looking to go beyond the DCMA 14, this episode is for you. We're breaking down what real schedule health looks like and providing 6 strategies that help you go from compliance to delivering with confidence. Stick around till the end and you'll walk away with a complete framework for assessing schedule health, not just checking a box.
Welcome to Beyond Deadlines, where we tackle challenges that schedule leaders face on a day-to-day basis. I'm Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of Nodes and Links, which is an AI schedule management company.
My name is Micah Piippo. I am the CEO of Movar US, a project management consultancy.
Beautiful. Okay. So Micah's had some free time on his hands, apparently, and he's gone away and actually done a whole bunch of work. I'm joking, of course. He just puts in the midnight oil. And today we're going to be talking about schedule health, which, Micah informed me correctly, is actually one of the most searched Google phrases in scheduling in the world. Okay, so this should be pretty popular then.
Right up there with why is my project late?
Okay, I'm going to approach this like I know nothing about schedule health. Micah, what is a health?
Is a health? It's a great place to start. And I think we should start at the very, very beginning in the basics. So that way, as we start to build, we're all on the same page here. To answer schedule health, we actually have to start with what is a schedule. There's probably lots of different definitions out there. My favorite, though, is schedule is just an algorithm. The act of scheduling is a kind of a social experiment, if you will, but the actual schedule is an algorithm. It has activities, logic, and it has a start and end point. You can ask it questions and get answers out of it. But to think of a schedule, let's just call it a 3-activity schedule. A start activity that is maybe like pour a foundation, put up some steel, put up a wall. You have some logic between those activities. And if one activity is late, it will drive the next. That to me is an algorithm which has to abide by certain rules to perform well. And we can dive deeper and deeper into those rules, but that is a schedule. Schedule health is the inspection or checking to ensure that the schedule is following certain rules that are generally described as best practices.
Okay, so I actually really like the definition that a schedule is an algorithm. I'm going to probe that a little bit, okay? I'll take a little bit from my book. So a schedule, I've said in part, a schedule is the manifestation of an intent. Okay. Now we're hoping that intent equals the real world. Am I correct in saying that an intent plus the algorithm gives what I'd call the structure? Is that a good way of saying it? Because people code stuff in. People are like, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that. That's dependent on that, etc., etc. Then, for example, in P6, they'll press F9 or whatever. It'll schedule with an algorithm, and then they have their schedule.
In a base sense, yes, I agree with you on that. To me, we can talk for hours and hours and hours on what is a schedule and all the different manifestations of it and all the different types of scheduling and planning you can do. It's going to take us way away from schedule health. So we kind of just need to grind on schedule, logic,
Fine.
activities.
Let's just accept it. I do accept it. Okay.
People. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole there.
You said schedule health is about checks. Okay, that conform to best practice. Now, do you have an example of one of these checks that's undisputed, that I can get my head round why this is a valid check? Just so I can ground myself in what you're talking about.
Yeah, and in a second, we'll pop up a whole list of checks and walk through them in detail. But to start out with, one would be missing logic. And so in our example, that was pour a foundation, put up steel, put up wall. If your steel activity did not have an actual logic link to put up the wall activity, then if your steel activity was delayed because there's, and it pushes, there's no logic to then drive the wall out. And so it's important to have logic that ties nearly every activity together. So that one is,
Okay.
I would say, pretty hard to dispute. Now, in all of these, we got to take a deep breath and realize that, out of all of the millions of different projects out there and the hundreds of different types of ways you can go about and do these things, there are exceptions to every single one of these rules that we're going to talk about today. Just how the world works, just how it is. However, we're going to try and guide that line down of best practices to ensure that you're understanding why you would make an exception in the future. We're not going to cover every exception on the podcast, but you need to understand why maybe that exception is okay. But I would say missing logic is probably one that I would have a hard time having someone have an argument saying, well, we can just not include logic.
Okay, all right, I'll get along with that. So you said you've got a list of checks.
Yeah, you ready to dive into them?
Go for it.
All right,
This is Beyond Deadlines, where we show strategies and tactics that people can implement right away.
Did you forget? You forgot that?
No, I just mumble.
That's all right. We all do. All right. So here is a list of checks that I've pulled up. The key thing to keep in mind here is the base set of checks that was created forever ago is the DCMA. It was created by the United States government as a basic way to check schedules. This program we're looking at now is Nodes and Links. It covers the base DCMA, and then it also has an additional 20 checks, which Greg can tell us more about in a little bit. The key thing that I like to keep in mind is if you're going to run a scheduled check and dive into it, you should make your life easy. There is a bunch of software out there that can do this. I may be a little biased here. I probably prefer Nodes and Links with some of the capabilities we're going to show you. You can do it on a lot of them. There's even some Excel programs and all of those things out there. But I mean, if you're getting serious and you're doing tens of millions of dollars in construction, find something that's going to provide you some value and give you some tips and tricks as you go. If we walk down the list here and go through them, I'll just go through them very quickly. Missing logic, we talked about. Leads and lags, those are the buffers you put in between activities on relationships. You have relationship types, you're banking towards finish to start relationships like we talked about earlier. So anything outside of that, it's going to flag. Hard constraints. If you pin one of those activities to a place, it's going to prevent the wobble and the movement of activities. High float. So I see this all the time, not on the primary paths, but as you start to get into secondary, tertiary, and beyond paths, you'll have stuff that has 250 days of total float on it. When in reality, that thing probably actually maybe has 30, 35, and there's just some logic or some sequencing missing in there to tie it together. Negative float, that's if your project's already behind. High duration, depending on where you're at and what level of schedule you're building. A lot of people, the golden rule is less than 20 days. I'm okay wiggling on that depending on what the activity is and where it's at and what level of schedule you're building. So if you're building an executive level schedule, that's okay probably to have longer than 20 days activities. If you're down building probably more L4. You probably want to break some of those activities down. However, I'm a big fan of longer duration activities with backup to them. So if we're just installing foundations, make that activity 75 days if you want to, but show me the backup of your installation sequence. Invalid dates. I'm guessing those are dates that are in the past, Greg, right? Like they're dates
Click on it. There you go.
Yeah. So prior to the data date. So these are activities that are happening in the past that haven't been started yet, and validating Primavera's P6 data date, activities that are lacking resources, and then you have missed tasks. So activities that were supposed to start didn't. Then you get into the critical path test. And the critical path test is super interesting and a good one because it's essentially saying, is your critical path valid? So in that 3 activity example that I said, if I move foundations, steel and the walls should move. If you run this test and it doesn't, that is a problem. There's something funky going on there with constraints or logic or whatever have you. And then Mr. Math Man, do you want to explain the critical path length index and the baseline execution index? I feel like I've been blurbing for a while now and I need a drink of water.
Yeah, I can. So the critical path length index is a measure of the efficiency of current project progress. So it's a ratio of 1 plus the project's total flow to the duration of the critical path. So what we're fundamentally looking at there is the project progressing along the critical path as it should. Things like A free float and total float will play into this, and things like productivity. So if much lower productivity is happening, you'd have a problem here. And the baseline execution index is essentially, it's an element of measure of progress. So it's the number of completed activities over the number of activities with a baseline finish on or before the data date. So it's kind of like, how many activities did you say you were supposed to finish? How many actually finished? These two are more progress checks, because one of the key things that leads to poor scheduling is, for example, let's say that your baseline execution index was only 0.4. So you've actually only done 40% of the stuff you said you'd do up to now. But then someone's just pressed F9, scheduled everything for tomorrow, and suddenly you're having 7 million welders turn up tomorrow, 7 million concreters. And it's like, this is a valid schedule. Is it? Is it? We need to ask a question there.
I know of 7 million welders. We're going to get into that in a second once we kind of ground out on the health check. So put a pin in that idea. The rest of these checks, I won't read through them all, but I mean, there are plenty of them. Right here, I'm seeing critical activities. Like if your whole activity, if all your entire schedule is all critical, that may be a problem.
So I'll just jump in there on those additional checks. So the DCMA, I'd just like to say to everyone, the DCMA, which stands for Defense Contract Management Agency, were generally defined as best practice. There's a handful of non-negotiable things in there, like mislogic, etc. But the additional checks were actually developed by a number of companies. It wasn't Linux, it was developed by a number of companies since then. And it's actually to do with the more high-end scheduling stuff. So delay analysis, forensics, change, risk management, etc. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So the scheduling check, which is, has the schedule been F9'd in P6? If you're in P6, are there past activities and they haven't been rescheduled? That's critical for delay analysis. You can't do forensic delay analysis if you haven't had a scheduled schedule. For risk analysis, it's circular logical dependencies. So if task A has a relationship with task B, but that task B has a relationship with task A and they're both finished start, you're going forward and backwards in time consistently, which means that Monte Carlo simulations will go forever and you'll never get a result at the end of them. So there's a whole bunch of these that were designed by much smarter people than I that are there to make sure that teams doing very high value analysis can actually start that analysis, as opposed to spending 2 weeks trying to do something and then realize that the simulation they thought would take 3 days, but now it's taking 5 days, is actually just running forever and they're going to burn up a cloud bill.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there are a ton of, even there's ones that aren't as sophisticated, like writing the data date, I mean, is one that I have to pull out constantly. And before we jump off, I just wanted to show you, so this is another benefit of using a software like Nodes and Links. What's this going to do when you drop down relationship types? It's going to give you a breakdown of the WBS. And then it's going to show you every single activity that it's saying it has an issue with. And then you can instantly export this out or do whatever you feel like with. And I think this is really great when you're trying to really move quickly on building your schedule health to not getting bogged down in the analysis of this. And there's, again, varying levels of this. You may be just trying to slap this together for an owner's requirement, but I think if you're trying to take that next step in scheduling and really start to develop good scheduling health processes, you're going to need something like this to help you work through this quicker. So I would say that's, the schedule health. I think where we should probably turn next is kind of following that same thread is, what do you do with it? Right? Like now you run your schedule health report. Maybe we could approach this from 2 different angles: GC owner angle, GC client. What do you do with it and how do you set it up? If you've been watching the show for a while, you know that I want the very best for you in your career as a construction planner or scheduler. That is why I wrote The Critical Path Career. This is the first book that is specifically geared toward construction planners and schedulers. In it, I provide specific advice on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and how to find a new job. I include 26 interview questions and provide the answers so you don't have to go into that next interview not feeling like your most confident self. I also provide 34 impact ideas that you can bring back to your team to help advance how they are planning and scheduling. You'll find a link for the book down below. Thank you for everyone who's supported the show. So I think, to me, the first thing that I think about when I think about schedule health is, what have we established in the contract as acceptable levels. How do I set up the processes around it? And then how am I going to leverage this to actually improve scheduling as a whole? Because the big no-no where you don't want to go down is where, and this is where a lot of schedulers go off the rails. You have a project team that's working their booty off to build a schedule, to execute a project. They fly in a consultant. The consultant runs that report that I just sent you and says, hey, Mr. GC, I don't know anything about your project. I don't know what's going on, but you have 12 start-to-start relationships that you need to fix. And I feel like that pathway is a pathway of just confrontation and just...
I would agree with that. I can't disagree with that. Okay, so flipping it around, what's the good way of doing it?
So the good way to me is, I think the schedule quality plays just a piece in the schedule health conversation. Let me pull up something else that we can chat through, because I think that gets lost in schedule health is everyone gets wrapped around the axle on DCMA 14. Those 14 checks we just sent you, that's how I review a schedule. I look at the checks and now I'm done. I think there's more to a schedule health check to me than just a DCMA 14 analytical report. I think that is easy to see, top level, but I think as you move down, and that's why I love the iceberg, is because this is the stuff on the bottom is the stuff you got to hammer into if you really are looking into schedule health and you want to do it the right way. If I kind of just work clockwise around the bottom of the iceberg, maybe I'll find Leonardo DiCaprio down there. The critical path, there are some length indexes in there, but what I'm saying on the critical path here is, does it actually match what people are saying they think the critical path is? If I go to any data center in the world, I have a gut feeling that it's probably going to run through power. The substation, the gear, the generators, all the way bringing up permanent power. That's probably going to be the critical path. Does that scope match what people are saying? In the same vein, build sequence. Does the schedule match what the project managers and superintendents are saying as what the build sequence is going to be, right? If they say we're going to go A, B, C, D, E phases, is that mirrored in the schedule? Has the schedule been localized at all? Is there any benchmarking? Is there anything, Greg, you said 7 million welders. Is there anything in the schedule that is telling us this is going to match reality or not? Going around the curve, operations. What is going on in the scheduling world of progressing, updating, reporting that it shows me that the capability exists there to create a healthy schedule? If you've gone and created a 50,000 activity schedule and you got 18,000 activities to update to a month and you got one scheduler, you've built something that I know is not going to generate a healthy schedule. The other one is, and we've talked about this on the show before, but it's a project manager superpower, and it's a great way to get them involved in the schedule is scope. Is all of the scope that is going to be delivered in the project in the schedule. And then lastly, on progress, if there's been progress on the project, many projects do a multiple contract, execution. And if you're executing a certain project or you're at a certain point in time, does the physical project progress in the project match what's in the schedule? Because if it's not going to be a healthy schedule. This is obviously a much more comprehensive approach to it. But when I think schedule health, this is what I'm thinking. Now, have I completely gone off my rocker, Greg, and totally gone way too far? Or is this kind of aligning with your vision?
No, it's aligning very strongly. What I'd say is, I'll build out and say a couple of things. So number one of the big problems I actually see with a lot of schedules is they copy paste from old files to new files. That creates a localization problem because you have calendars or you have coding structures in there that are not used but create problems for the database behind. So when you actually want to run progress or things like this, it becomes a very big problem. So localization is a very big point. The other point I'd say is, so here you've got two phrases. You've got quality, which is, DCMA 14 point. You've got integrity, which is another. And then you've actually got a third line, which is assurance. If you've got a lot of money to spare, some of the very big, Arcadis, Accenture, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, these kinds of companies will come in and, in inverted commas, assure, and they do exactly those processes. Plus, they will interview everyone and give their opinion on whether or not they should have got the job they're currently employed under. So have you got the suitably qualified people there as well? Depends which level you want to go, but I actually think that, iceberg's pretty damn spot on.
Yeah, I think assurance starts to bleed. It's tough because you could say schedule health includes, and I kind of did a little bit on progress, but you could say it includes a healthy forecast. And now you're off into analyzing progress and really getting into assurance. And so this stuff has never been formally documented and said, this is what schedule health is. I mean, you can go read plenty of articles trying to ascertain it, and most of them stop at DCMA 14. And I wouldn't recommend people stop there. How far you want to go down that trail, I don't know. We can get as pedantic as you want and have a giant 48 comment LinkedIn battle over this, which I'm excited for. Let's do it. I think it's all in a good lane to go down. Do you know what I mean? As long as we're advancing past that initial 14 point and really getting into these, I think that's the important thing to go hammer out. And
I'm going to ask you a bit of a challenging question, if I may. Okay.
What is beyond deadline?
The obviousness of the logic will span out, but I'm going to push you beyond and say, okay, give me something more tangible. How does having a good schedule correlate with schedule performance? Now, I say the logic should be obvious, because if you have a schedule that in absolutely no way represents what you're actually trying to do, and the teams are going, the teams are over in Brazil building a stadium, and your schedule says airport in Calgary. Okay, yeah, but obviously it's going to correlate. But in the middle, where we're not talking silliness, where like, what if someone's got a pretty low quality schedule, then someone's got a medium schedule, and someone's actually got a pretty good schedule? How does that correlate with predictability and volatility of delivery dates and milestones?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I like how you drop that at the 25-minute mark.
Yeah. I'm dropping that like I don't run a company with billions of data points.
Yeah. Let's cover some of the obviouses first, and then maybe as I start to state the obviouses, something intelligent will come out of my mouth. I think so. The first part is with a schedule with low schedule health. Let's just say like your DCMA is all kind of funky. I think the other thing to me is I have to pair that. I always have to pair stuff with other things. If you listen to the show long enough, I'm a big fan of taking a couple different data points to assess what's going on. I'm not going to just take a DCMA 14 run out the door, but if I run that DCMA out the door and it's not great, and then I'm looking at something just very basic like starts or finishes predictability, or maybe duration, and I'm looking at how good they are at forecasting out their schedule. The first thing that's going to happen is just like when I'm looking at, are you going to finish on time and the predictability of it? I am less trustful of the schedule that has a little less health to it, because you're playing games is what's happening. You're manipulating the schedule, usually in reverse, to match what's going on in reality, rather than building out the plan as it's supposed to. So you basically have Frankensteined it back into what you want it to say. If you went and built it forward in the future and you don't really have that plan in place, there's going to be a lower predictability level there. But you got to take that with a grain of salt, because there are projects that just don't have talented schedulers that don't know all of these rules. However, if I looked at their schedule, low schedule quality, high predictability, they have that plan built out and they're hitting the dates and metrics, and it's just not quite there. However, what I would say then is you also are kind of kneecapping yourself as to leveraging what you can do with the schedule. So low schedule quality, if I pair that then with, does it match the project scope, or is it what it is? The thing is, often then it transitions into being like a task list or a hit list, or hey, we're doing this stuff at this date. And then it kind of like, it's a constant shuffle of chaos, and you're constantly looking down at your feet. You're not looking 3-4 months out and then being able to strategize what's coming down the pipe, right? The other one is if it's the exact opposite and it's not the tactical thing and it just doesn't match reality at all, and you have low schedule health, you can't really run quality predictability on it. You can't really strategize your project. And then this is where it goes really off the rails. Every single person has their own schedule at that point because they can't trust the main schedule. Now, Superintendent Kevin, Superintendent Jill, those are my schedules. The equipment guy's rocking off of one. And it's just the cycles of communication and frustration. I mean, it just has to just add up and kind of just pull at the project in and of itself. If you drop a rock in a pond on that project, going and doing an analysis to figure out what happened, oh, this generator's delayed, you're never going to get there and you're not going to get an accurate answer. So it's like, it impacts everything. And it really starts to handcuff a project and constrain your ability to go out and do things. So
I'm going to say the data now, because we're actually in the middle of doing a big analysis internally. But I'll say the data, which is, it's a wide S curve. So On one axis, if you have project predictability, and by the way, everything you said is spot on as to why these reasons, but if you have on the y-axis is project predictability, with the top being perfectly predictable and the bottom being wildly unpredictable. And then the x-axis is schedule integrity, not health, integrity, with 0 point being total rubbish, everything fails, and the top being everything passes. It's a very sharp S-curve where it's wildly unpredictable when the things are piled of rubbish, obviously. As you improve the integrity, nothing happens for a while. It's like an S-curve, so nothing happens for a while, and then it reaches a point where it starts to be more predictive, and then it starts to branch. So some projects get very predictive, some projects stop getting predictive. What it is that predictability is actually, it correlates with three things: integrity, change, and risk. So if you think about it, if you have a project with perfect schedule integrity, schedule health, but it's wildly undergoing scope changes, and there's total volatility in productivity rates, you can't get any more predictive. Equally, if you have a project that has decent schedule integrity, but almost zero volatility and risk, and no changes happening at all, you can get pretty predictive pretty quickly. But so what I'd say there is that there's two horizons I see in the data. Number one is, if you're bad, you're bad. It just has to get better. And then comes a point where it's like, okay, what's the new tip of the bigger iceberg? Is it integrity? Yes. Is it change? Or is it volatility, which is risk?
Yeah, I think we all know the initial bad, you're bad. I think going up, that is an interesting one, because the first flash in my mind was suboptimization. When I was talking about earlier that DCMA 14, and you are just so adamant about finish to start relationships, like, is that where you start plateauing? And then really what's happening is there's change orders coming down the pipe. You're not able to get them in the schedule and reflect them fast enough and forecast them out. And you're still tripping over finish to start relationships because you're sub-optimizing on the wrong thing. That next phase branch, that's really interesting. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot to unpack there.
There is. The challenge, then, the thing that I haven't quite figured out yet is because these trends only come out in vast amounts of data. So you can say in vast amounts of data, this is how it works. But when you're working on the individual, there's no, if, this number is 2, then do this.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out a way where you can say, we need to stop looking at finished starts and we need to start looking at change in the moment. You can do it retrospectively, but everything is right when you look, everything is obvious when you look in the past. It's like, how do you do it in the moment? And I think this is where frameworks like the one you put forward help, but people also have to have a wider view of these. And really this leans to the true value of a high quality scheduler, because the true value of a high quality scheduler is they've gone through this cycle many times and they have a very strong gut feel about the kinds of things that they need to start focusing on.
Well, folks, before we wrap up for today, just want to shout out Greg's book, The Physics of Project Acceleration. If your schedule is healthy and you're looking to go faster, understand tips, tricks, and techniques to give your project a little boost of speed. We'll include a link in the show notes so you can go out and grab yourself a copy. Before we jump, Greg, any final thoughts on schedule health? Do you want to go see a doctor now just to get a quick checkup to make sure you're healthy? What is the last thing you're going to do?
No, I've got no other thoughts. I think that this is interesting. I want to revisit, why is this the highest search for thing on Google? But actually, when you look at the data, most schedules have low quality. It's like I'm gonna spend the night on online trying to figure that out.
I have a sneaking suspicion it's the bottom of the iceberg. And so they're applying the wrong medicine to the illness. You're not getting to the root cause of why the issue is there. You passed your DCMA 14, but is your schedule really that good? I think that may be where the hidden gem lies. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. If you have any recommendations for topics or anything you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. You know where to find us. See you on the next one.